All right, so welcome everybody to the Copyright for Visual Artists workshop slash panel that we are putting on today. Thank you so much to everybody who decided to come in person and online to this awesome live workshop. This workshop is sponsored by the Show and Sale program at the AU Arts Students Association and is funded by RBC Future Launch. So it's thanks to us that we can present these, provide our presenters CARFAC fees, and make it available for everyone within AU Arts to access now and in the future. So thank you again for coming today. My name is Leah. I am the show and sale coordinator. I'll be your moderator for today. We have our panelists as well. Tara, if you want to wave a quick hand so they know who you are, and Clara. Tara is from CARFAC, and Clara is an alumni of AU Arts. So before we begin, I do want to start with a land acknowledgement. All show and sale artists and staff are treaty people who live, work, play, and create in Treaty 7 territory. We are proud and honored to contribute to the diverse artistic community in Mohkinstsis, otherwise known as Calgary. For the past 30 years, Show and Sale has been hosted in Mohkinstsis in the traditional Treaty 7 territory of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Siksika, the Kainai, the Piikani, Tsuut'ina nations, as well as the Stoney Nakoda, Bearspaw, Chiniki, and Goodstoney. We also acknowledge the members of the Inuit and Métis communities, specifically the Métis Nation Region 3. Finally, in the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge all people who make their home here are Treaty 7 people. Here is the agenda for today. The first little bit, I will give a brief introduction of our panelists and the topic that we are discussing today, and then we'll go forth with some panel questions and have a little bit of time left for an open Q&A. I do ask that if you are joining us online, to please keep your mics muted until the Q&A session. If you would like to drop a question in the chat, we will answer those in chronological order as they come in. For those of you live in the audience, we ask that you keep your questions till the end as well. So what are the panel topics primarily today? As some of you may know, Show and Sale puts on workshops to help with the professional development of artists here at AU Arts. We don't just offer them for those within our entrepreneurial program. We want to make this resource available for all. And one of the workshops that we are very proud to be able to offer is the Copyright for Visual Artists. We did the first iteration of this workshop back in 2021. And this year we are updating it and bringing in some live panelists to talk about how copyright is continuously changing, also to discuss some new technologies that are popping up. So we'll get started with this panel by talking about some really basic copyright questions for those of you who, may just be brand new at this or need a quick refresher. Then we're going to move into some new challenges to copyright and artist rights today here in Canada, and finish with embracing new technologies and how artists can use what's happening right now to their advantage. So first, I'd like to introduce our panelist, Tara. Tara is an artist, educator, entrepreneur, and motivator. She received her BFA from the University of Calgary in 2015 and has been practicing visual arts professionally since the age of 9. In her role as an engagement coordinator at CARFAC, Tara is a source of empowerment for Alberta professional visual artists. Tara's vision is to spread awareness and create peace and unity. Through her art, she explores subjects of humanity, empathy, and joy using newspapers and bright colors. Clara is a Canadian-based trans femme artist whose exploration of identity, loss, connection, and interpersonal dynamics has created a distinctive presence in the ever-evolving digital art world. Would you like to describe? I'm sorry. Today, her practice is a rich amalgamation of mediums, seamlessly weaving together elements of AI, 3D, Photoshop, video editing, and performance art. Despite this wide range of techniques, Clara's primary focus lies in creating conceptual 3D work that pushes the boundaries of character design and animation. So let's begin with the copyright basics questions. So these I'm going to be directing mostly towards Tara from Carfac. So let's start with the basics. What is copyright defined as in creative fields?
Awesome. So copyrights, I guess in simple words, is just the right to copy. But generally it is referred to the rights, legal rights of the owner of the intellectual property. Copyrights give you the rights to copy or present a work. In general, a copyright is the sole right to produce, reproduce a work or substantial part of it in any form. It also includes the rights to exhibit, to perform the work. If the work is unpublished, copyright also includes the right to publish the work or any substantial part of it. Copyrights provide protection for literary, artistic, dramatic, or musical works and other subject matters known as performances, sound recordings, and in case of indigenous artists, also communication signals. Sometimes copyrights also get confused with the moral rights. And I'm going to quickly read what Canada Copyright Act is about and where moral rights are standing in terms of that, because some people still don't understand what's the difference. So the definition of moral rights in Canada is found in the sections 14.1 and 14.2, the authors, and also sections 17.1 and 17.2, the performers of the Canada's Copyright Act. The author has the following moral rights: to the integrity of the work, to be associated with the work as its author by name or under a pseudonym, and to remain anonymous if they want to. But the Act states that moral rights cannot be assigned, but may be waived in whole or in part by the author. An assignment of copyright does not by itself constitute a waiver of any moral rights. There must be express language detailing the waiver. So when people are getting permission to have the copyright of a work of art, the moral rights of the work of art still remains with the original creator. And as long as, the creator, him or herself, expresses in writing that I'm going to waive my rights, the work is still going to be associated with them. An example of that would be a classical piece like Mona Lisa. Everyone knows that this piece is, Da Vinci's, or at least is being associated with Da Vinci, even if he's not alive, if we cannot license his work anymore, he still has the moral rights to it. So those are the responses for that question.
Awesome, thank you. Next question. What kind of work can be covered by copyright law in Canada?
That's a great question. So all the original works that are completed. So that would be a poem, a painting, a sculpture, an installation, a performance, a song, something that is completed in its form. An abstract idea or just a title does not have a copyright. So you cannot trademark an abstract idea.
Awesome. Why are copyright and intellectual property laws important for artists?
So the artists actually can get compensated for their work, because that's how you can make money from the work that you do as an artist. I'm going to quickly read the status of the Artists Act here, which kind of brings out the importance of why artists should be compensated for their work. So the Act may be cited as the status of the Artists Act, and you can find it on the federal government website. The government of Canada hereby recognizes the importance of the contribution of artists to the cultural, social, economic, and political enrichment of Canada. The importance to Canadian society of conferring on artists a status that reflects their primary role in developing and enhancing Canada's artistic and cultural life, and in sustaining Canada's quality of life. The role of the artist, in particular, to express the diverse nature of the Canadian way of life and the individual and collective aspirations of Canadians. That artistic creativity is the engine for the growth and prosperity of dynamic cultural industries in Canada, and the most important one, the importance to artists that they be compensated for the use of their works, including the public lending of them. So based on the status of the Artists Act, the most important aspect of copyrights is for artists to get compensated for their work, and also just why art is so important in the culture and the economy and society and all of that together.
I think like another level onto that is like most companies, when they start ripping artists' work, they don't need like necessarily like a physical lawsuit, but just the fact that the law exists, a lot of the time you'll just be like paid out. So just the fact that it is illegal is enough to like deter most companies from jacking your stuff, because although you can get down to pedantics based on where the company is, but just like having that law in place is really important for actually like ensuring that you don't see your drawing on like a t-shirt from Shine, although that happens all the time too, but you can sue them, you know, so.
Yeah, it definitely adds a level of protection.
Yeah, and it's good that we have, you know, law and regulations here in Canada that at least give a bit of a baseline, you know, even though that it can be hard sometimes to figure out like how to actually implement it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the history of Canadian copyright law and where it is at today?
All right. So the history of copyright law in Canada is still kind of in progress. Like they always renew it and keep working on it. But the modernization of the Canadian copyright was forced in 1924. Although there were a few amendments made to the Act in the following years, the modernization of the Act did not begin actually until 1988. And so I'm going to read the what includes in the amendments. An exhibition right for artistic works, explicit protection of computer programs, enhanced moral rights, the creation of a new copyright board, increased criminal sanctions, measures to improve the collective administration of copyright, the abolition of compulsory licenses for the recording of musical works, a provision which compelled a copyright owner to allow someone to use his or her work subject to payment of a specific royalty rate, and a new procedure to provide licenses to use works when the copyright owner cannot be located. So that's what Clara was just referring to, having something in place that people can refer to even if they cannot find the artist, knowing that this is there, available, the law is out there, and there is a specified amount and license that people should obtain before they use someone's work.
Tara, can you actually tell us a bit more about CARFAC and other organizations fighting for artists' rights and who are kind of at the center of these interesting debates about copyright, moral rights, and more?
Absolutely. So CARFAC is definitely one of those organizations, and what CARFAC does is providing best practices to artists and encourage them to practice these best practices. So best practices are just generally kind of recommendations or suggestions to artists to know their rights, roles, and responsibilities. Also, CARFAC works with people who are engaging with artists in different capacity, working with them, different organizations and businesses, to kind of educate them as well and let them know what their roles and responsibilities are when they're working with artists. And so in this way, they're kind of encouraging the fair treatment of artists, but at the same time creating and encouraging determination for artists to know what is right for them. And CARFAC also believes that artists are the best spokesperson for their work. So if they know their own rights and responsibilities, it's going to be much harder to, anyone for them to take advantage of their rights. So CARFAC is definitely one of those organizations. Another organization is called Copyright Visual Arts. They are a nonprofit copyright management society that provide authors' rights administration for professional Canadian and Quebecois visual and media artists. So what Copyright Visual Art does, they respond to the shifting, art economy in the digital age by providing effective tools to enable visual and media artists to achieve sustainable careers. And copyright visual arts facilitates broad access to the finest works by Canadian and Quebecois artists through simple and effective online or person-to-person licensing. So what they do, let's say Clara is an accomplished artist here who's getting lots of business from different parts of the world, and people are contacting Clara for getting the work of this artist to be on, different shows or on a publication or being featured in a TV show or whatever. It's going to be a lot of administrative work for the artist, and just knowing how much to license, for different works and different mediums and all of that. So what copyright visual arts does is that they will just take care of all of that, and they will just send a paycheck to the artist instead of them doing all of this work. And they will sometimes even negotiate on behalf of the artist to make sure that they are compensated fairly. And excuse me, the copyright visual arts and CARFAC actually have worked together at some point, and together they have developed this document that is called RAV fee schedule. Some of you might know of this. You can actually find this document on our website or just the RAV website itself too. This document provides the minimum recommended fee for different work that artists might be asked to do. So it's both artist fees and also like royalties and different services that artists might be asked to do. And so the royalty fees also for like different publications, depending on what kind of organization is looking to get license of the copyrights, is provided there. And these are again minimum recommended. The artist always can negotiate to get compensated for more. And sometimes also happens that an organization or person will contact you. They don't know how much you should be charging them. You can always refer them to this document, and then they will tell you that, well, that's out of my budget. Then in that case, you can still negotiate with them and maybe accept an honorarium for your work. You will still get compensated instead of just your work being stolen and being taken advantage of. So those are some of the organizations that work with artists.
Awesome, thank you. And I see you've also brought some like business cards for CARFAC and stuff later. So
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, anyone here live in the audience, if you're interested in learning more about that, you can come grab one later after the panel. For those of you online, we will be including some of the links to various websites and resources in the description of the workshop if you are viewing it after the fact. So this question is kind of for both of you. Can you give me some examples of, what happens when someone's copyrights or general like moral rights get infringed upon? Do you have either of you any interesting examples that have happened in the past 10 years kind of here in Canada?
Within Canada, there's like a few interesting ones. I know I have a slide later on, but there's like more so to do with like the AI training data. But for my own experience, I've had like really quintessential design elements stolen before, then used on like by companies on different products. And like I said earlier, like it wasn't so much like I pressed charges against them, but I basically talked shit on the internet, and then they were scared, so they paid me off. So I think like I don't like advocate for this necessarily on like a legal basis, but a lot of the time bringing it to the public's attention really does go a long way in terms of like actually saving yourself like thousands of dollars in legal fees, because most of the time everybody's gonna take the side of the artist, right? I can't talk about exactly what happened because of NDAs, but yeah, that was basically like my, I guess, good example of it.
So that it actually like kind of ended up working out for you.
So 90% of the time when a company knows they fucked up, they like we'll just pay you off. Like if they fully jack your stuff and you have some pull against them in terms of like social media or whatever, they're gonna usually pay you off to not like, I guess, escalate to that level. Because if it's like pretty abhorrent, like pretty direct copying, then like you can sue, right? And it's gonna cost them a lot more money to deal with a lawsuit than it is to deal with just giving you money.
So yeah, that's what happens. They can get sued by the artists. There are a few examples here that I have from recent events. One of them would be the case of National Gallery of Canada that was sued and it was settled in 2014. And I think it was between Carfax and National Gallery of Canada. The whole story was that they wanted to have this group show, but they did not want to compensate the artists. And then Carfax sued them as part of them fighting for artist rights, and they did not want to accept that they were doing this as a collective. They kind of like said no, like if any individual artist that is part of this show has any issues, they can come and tell us, but they were already kind of protected by the copyright law anyway. So anyway, eventually they had to accept to pay, and of course they did not want to pay because it would have been too expensive. And this is what was their reasoning behind it, was that here the concern was expressed as to whether the parties would have fared better if they had continued negotiations, as well as pointing out that the ruling in Carfax favor would be expensive for the National Gallery of Canada and other galleries across the country. As well, it will also have serious implications to more obscure artists who may want to waive their minimum fee and negotiate freely with the galleries. So if that would be the case, of course, all artists can waive their, copyright or like their fees for exhibition if they want to. But a gallery of that size, it's a national gallery, they should compensate the artists. Another example that is still falls in the gray area and they still haven't really come to any point, excuse me, is the usage of works of art in the academic spaces, so universities. They package it as a way that, because it's for education, they're not going to compensate the artists. So because they're not selling the work or it's not a public exhibition of the work, then they're not paying the artists. So that one is still kind of in progress and falls under the gray area. A couple other examples that I can bring is one with Jeff Koons and these puppies. So he's very well known for having multiple of these cases that he has infringed another artist's copyrights. And his work is mostly known for appropriation, and like he takes a lot of ideas from different places and that are like very popular and part of pop culture. So with this particular case, he took a photograph that was mainly used on lots of greeting cards and postcards, and it was just a black and white photo of a couple with a few puppies. And he hired someone else to make the sculpture of this photo, with the difference of making the puppies blue and adding some flowers to the hair of the couple that were holding the puppies. And again, his excuse for it was that it was a fair use. Sometimes also, I think maybe those who are in more power, they think that they're doing a favor to the other artists. But if it is actually a collaboration, there should be some sort of contract between them. And that, in this case, obviously was not happening. So anyway, the photographer ends up suing Jeff Koons, and it was not enough of a explanation of fair use, or that it was transformative way of using the photo in that sense. Another example that was actually super recent, it was settled in this January of this year, so in 2024, is with Richard Prince. He had like years long of litigation process going on between him and two other photographers. So what he did, he took the photographers' photos that were posted on Instagram, and he added his own commentary, kind of like text on the bottom, and he was exhibiting these works as part of his show at multiple different galleries. And so the photographers did the same thing that Clara did. Started, speaking up and just putting it out there in the public, maybe on Instagram and all of these platforms, and also started, just a litigation and just filing the complaint. But this went on for like 7 years, and something that I'm going to actually read here that was interesting from one of the photographers. He said, when I sued Richard Prince more than 7 years ago, it was hard to imagine I'd be, along with Donald Graham, part of this history-making judgment, finally holding Prince accountable for his conduct. So this is McNutt said in the email that he wrote. It is a victory not just for me, but for all working artists like me. We might not have the same profile of a celebrity artist, but we deserve credit and compensation for our work. So he was also successful to get almost over $500,000 from Prince, Richard Prince, this artist. Anyway, these are some of the examples of what happens.
Well, it's good to know, like, the variety of different situations in which, copyright comes into play, and how artists and organizations are kind of involved in all of these. So you mentioned a little bit about, like, the transformative differences and whether, that actually changes who owns what kind of art. Now, this is something that's kind of been floating around sometimes here in school, sometimes outside in the world, about the idea of, like, this 20% difference between, me making a painting and you changing, quote unquote, 20% of it, and it being a brand new work of art. Can you, like, briefly elaborate on kind of, like, is this true or not? And what do usually people consider to be enough of a change from one kind of art for it, the copyright to, get challenged by another person?
Sure, it's actually not true. So infringement is not a mathematical formula that you could put into, 20%, 80%. Even small changes could still show as copyright being infringed. If the copies have the most important aspects, or those elements that are central to that work of art are still found in the copy version, then the copyright has been infringed. And so what defines the work and is central to the work is really what cannot be copied. Like, for example, with that case with Jeff Koons, obviously the puppies and the couple were part of it. That was very central. Just because he added color blue to the puppies and added the flowers did not really make a whole lot of difference to the meaning of that photo. So, yeah.
Okay, good to know. So, slight tangent here, but I know this has kind of been in the news a little bit, and I'm wondering if either of you can speak to maybe what's happening a little bit with the Canadian artist resale right that's been happening recently, and maybe why some AU art students should care about, advocacy like that.
Do you have anything to add about it?
I mean, I can jump in.
Sure.
Like, I work primarily in crypto. So it's really good for that in terms of your sales are, like, ingrained, where, like, no matter what, the buyers have to pay you royalties. Like, they don't have a choice. So I, like, fully agree with, like, physical artists getting the same thing as well. It's kind of something, it's like the holy grail of, like, artists actually getting paid, because 90% of the volume really does happen, like, post initial sale. You hear stories about, like, collectors hoarding artwork, or they buy, like, 10 pieces and then sell them off slowly, because that's how collectors make money. But yeah, I mean, I read a little bit about it, about the actual movement, but I'm sure you got some deeper insight than me.
Sure, yeah. So in the essence, that's what it's supposed to be. Like, when a work of art is being sold to another collector or another person, they become the owner of it, and then for works of art, they always appreciate. So they're just going to become more expensive. And it's kind of sad that the artist is not going to take the most profit after it keeps getting, sold again and again and again. So based on this law that is still actually in the progress, and people still need to vote on it, 5% should go back, over $1,000 in the secondary market. And this was also brought up mostly because of how much the copyrights of the indigenous artists have been infringed with their craft work and things that are being sold as part of the souvenirs or traditional products of Canada, or like things that are again being really advertised and promoted as merchandise that people can buy. So mainly for the economic viability of indigenous artists at the secondary markets, the law proposes 5% back over $1,000 in secondary markets. This still needs to be voted on in the Parliament of the Government of Canada, and it is engaging with stakeholders and indigenous groups on the implementation of artist resale rights in Canada. The artist's resale rights is a legal right that would allow visual artists and their heirs to collect a royalty on certain public resales of their works. In 2021, the Ministers of Canadian Heritage and Innovation, Science and Industry were tasked with establishing it in Canada in their mandate letters. And to develop an effective domestic policy, it would be better to understand the domestic art market through the surveys. And there is this survey that is actually available on the Copyright Visual Arts website. I believe the Carfax National website also still has this survey on there. And it is encouraged that if you know any indigenous artists or you are working with them, to encourage them to go and fill out this survey that gives the Government of Canada more information on how to kind of finalize this bill, but it is still going on. It has not been finalized yet.
Yeah, good to know, and where people can go to learn more about it and advocate.
Absolutely, yeah.
There we go. So the last question of this section is, we talked about a couple of instances, got to know kind of the basics of what copyright is and what artist rights are. Where can students find additional guidelines and resources to help them recognize and respect the copyright of others and themselves?
Yeah, so there's actually no laws, but best practices, such as crediting the collaborators, the resources that you take that information or work of art from, provide the resource information, and it should be acknowledged. Always ask for permission. Don't assume that if you found a photo online or somewhere that you're free to use. And also find out the licensing cost or fee and contact the person who is the owner of that work of art. So, and I think it's really important that we as artists practice these best practices ourselves, because I guess in the end, we are the ones who are going to work with each other a lot too. And it's better to work as a collaboration instead of stealing somebody else's work and taking credit for it. So, yeah.
Awesome, thanks. So we're going to move on to our second main topic of the panel, and this is kind of where it gets funky to talk about, what is continuously changing within copyright and artist rights these days. So these questions are going to be directed towards both of our lovely panelists, who can feel free to jump in at any time. So for both of you, what do you think are the biggest challenges facing artists today regarding their own copyright?
AI, number one. Yeah, I think art has been increasingly picked apart by the internet to down to a core foundational level, and it's really fascinating to see, because so much of our work is digitized, and legally when you give up or when you post the work online, it belongs to the company. It belongs to Instagram, it belongs to Facebook, and they have free usage rights for everything. And that also encompasses actually selling your data to train AI data sets, which is kind of the biggest thing now, because depending on how you use AI, it's very much it's either can be stealing or it can be basically drawing reference, but there's a very blurry fine line between the two of them, right? Yeah, I think protecting biggest challenges. I think being able to protect your work while still sharing it is probably number one thing I'd say.
Yeah. I also think that just not being asked for permission, and like people just using your work, not getting compensated is the biggest challenge because as an artist, you might be working, you're creating things. Someone may look at your work on Instagram and, just take a picture of it, paint it, or do whatever, and maybe even sell it, but you won't know because it's also from individuals, right? Not only companies or like big celebrity artists. Also with new platforms, you're kind of convinced to share for free all the time, especially like on Instagram or with any of these social media platforms. We're constantly like encouraged to post content, post every day. You have to be consistent with your posting if you want the algorithm to like show you or bring you up and all of that. So you will end up probably posting a lot of your work. And I suggest, if that's what you're doing, try to have a variety of content. Put your hands and face in the photos beside your artwork. Don't post just the image of the artwork, just so you can maybe protect it a little bit that way. But also the other challenge is just not having enough, knowledge of copyright. So just a lack of knowledge of copyrights can be a huge challenge too.
Yeah, really good to know. And this kind of segues into our second question. So how are social media platforms changing the way we think about who owns art? And I know this is kind of opening a little bit of a can of worms.
Yeah.
Also, Claire, would you mind talking a little bit closer to the mic?
Like this close?
Yeah. Beautiful.
Okay. Yeah, so with social media, I think it's very much about like court of public opinion when it comes to art as well. And there's definitely like a lineage or what was the word I just said earlier? I'm so bad with anyways, there's like a way of like tracing back like who actually posted the original work. But having your work out online, it's like you're kind of like flipping a coin almost. Like I have lots of photographer friends especially who get their stuff jacked all the time, and there's no like internet police, so people are going to like take your image if it's good enough, remake it, and then kind of just like sell it off as their own. And the trick that I found to it is just to very much like enforce that it is your work in a sense where you keep putting out work that's like almost like within the same breath, right? I've had my shit stolen, but people are able to recognize it as mine because I just post the living shit out of everything, so that I guess like I have like a bit of a presence. But for smaller artists, I think just like if somebody's reposting your work, just be down in the fucking comments, like be just like rallying people. I'm very much like not necessarily like witch hunty when it comes to protecting your art, but it's like the easiest like free way to actually like do that, right? Because if a company is just like ripping your work or another artist is ripping your work and selling it up as their own, the number one way to like get to them is to like, I guess, show people that they're stealing, and then that cuts off their money supply, right? So I'll probably encourage them to not actually continue to do that, but it's very much like, especially nowadays with AI and data sets and all of that, it's very much like when you put something online, you're kind of just flipping the coin. And there's so many people online, 50% of people online are anonymous. So there's only so much you can do outside of like, I guess, just be iconic and post your work as much as possible so people just know it's your work, Maybe that's shit advice, but I don't know.
100% agree. I think you have to really think and realize, like when you're putting your work out there, you don't have that much, control over it anymore. So just think ahead before posting, especially again, photos of your work or even yourself. I mean, these days, one of the issues is people posting lots of pictures of their babies, not realizing that there's actually a risk for that too. But realize that you cannot really going to be able to protect your work once it's out there on social media. So
yeah. Wise words.
I guess we're going to get into this.
Yeah, that's the next question.
Yeah. I guess my next question is, so what happens when artists begin to actually sell their artwork? They're starting to get commercial. How do you protect and respect copyright while, also trying to make a living? Because it can be kind of tough trying to make ends meet.
Honestly, I think the thing is, it's like once it's out there, most of the time it's not going to get ripped off. Like 90% of the time, you won't get stolen from. So it's not like you drop a good photo or a good idea, it goes really viral, you end up making money off of it or whatever. Somebody's just going to instantly steal it and then try to make their own cash off of it. Like it's very much like copyright infringement does happen. It's not super common, but I think the thing is to just keep like pushing out work to, I guess, like overcome it. It's almost like most retail stores have like a shrinkage factor of like how much shit they're expecting to be stolen, and that just is like kind of like what it means to be an artist nowadays, right? Like you post reels or like say you do like video work, there's going to be free boots of your work if it's good. You know, it's just like the way it is. Most of the time there's not, but if it's, you know, if somebody sees it who runs one of those pages, like a reposting page, and they're like, oh, cool, this is nice, I'm going to post this on my own page, 0 credit. There's just like not that much you could do about it. You know, the best way to like protect your work now is to, I guess, like protect your work from AI algorithms, because most of the work that's being stolen now is via AI. It's not so much just like copy paste. There's a few different programs you can use, like either Glaze or Nightshade. Nightshade's better because it fucks the whole software. Excuse my French. But yeah, so trying to make a living with it is definitely like, you have to be very scrappy and continue to be scrappy.
Yeah. Any advice, Tara?
Yeah, I also think like use metadata, you know, things that cannot be removed, like adding watermark to your photos if you're really concerned. And that can protect your art to some extent. Yeah, but there's really no easy way to answer this, and you know, try to learn as much as possible, see what works for you. Maybe you don't even want to post your work on social media if it's going to cause so much stress and anxiety. So, and also maybe you want to become a visual, you know, copyright visual arts member, just so if you see that lots of your art is being stolen and your rights are being infringed, at least you would have an organization to kind of advocate for you and maybe fight for your rights, or at least also I think again, like educating the public is also very important. Maybe you can post once in a while that here are my license fees, and here's like things like that, that should be probably also part of the content, so they would know that you are actually a business, that you're not posting this just for fun. And so if anyone else would trace back to your page, can find out all this information, and that you are actually advocating for yourself as an artist too.
And as well as another thing I just thought of, most social medias allow you to file DMCA takedowns as well, which is like another easy way to do it. Like it doesn't necessarily get you your money back, like from what they've been in advertising fees, but it does get it taken down. Some of the time, like 50%, it really depends. It's just like, big companies and all that.
So my next question is, what do you think the difference is between, being inspired by a piece of art and then outright copying?
I think like drawing design elements and drawing like artistic inspiration from certain elements of a work is just like what all art is in general. I don't think anything's truly original anymore. I think like we passed that point like 500 years ago.
Yeah.
But I think the main difference between copying and drawing is just about like how much of it are you actually pulling, right? Like, so like tracing a photograph that you saw online is obviously copying, right? Like generating Superman in AI and then selling that as like your own design is copying, right? It's just like, I feel like a good rule of thumb is if you feel icky about it, then you're probably copying and not being inspired by it, right? Because like most artists, especially like concept artists who work like games, movies, TVs, like we're all drawing inspiration from wherever, right? Like I draw inspiration, like I go onto ArtStation like every day, and like look at work and drawing design inspiration like from different elements of other people's work, but it doesn't mean I'm copying them, Like it just depends on like how much you're really taking. And also it's just boring to copy other people's stuff. I don't know, the original like.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Like one of the purposes of having copyrights law was also encouraging creativity and originality, so people actually create more original art. But I 100% agree with you. We can get inspired literally by everything, everywhere, other works of art and nature and everything. But when it comes down to the difference between inspiration and, like copying, it really comes down to the legal aspects of copyrights. And copyrights have expiry date. So once the work of an art or that intellectual property enters into the public domain, then at that point you don't need to ask for permission and no one actually owns it. So for example, like Walt Disney is a big company and their copyrights are entailing up to 95 years. So they're almost getting close to it. I'm not sure if they have entered.
Oh, that just
yet.
happened.
Yeah,
this
here
year.
we go.
Yeah, Mickey
So-
Mouse is open source now.
Here
or
we go.
open.
So yeah, like you can get inspired, if you want to use Mickey Mouse for, your art, you can. But like before it was, if someone would want to put the Mickey Mouse on a T-shirt and start selling like mass production of these T-shirts, they definitely would get sued. And unless they have certificate or license of the copyrights to do so. Here in Canada, the expiry date is 70 years, and so after 70 years, the work will enter the public domain. So again, for example, you can use the photo of like Mona Lisa and say that you're inspired by this painting, and you'll have created a new painting based on that concept or the way that portrait was. But you cannot make that same painting using the photo of Obama, let's say. And if you don't know who was the photographer of the photo, or you don't have the copyrights, license from the photographer of the Obama's picture. So yeah, that's
Actually, a
That's
really
what we would do.
interesting example that just
Oh.
happened last year with the Portrait Painter of the Year
Okay.
contest. Did you hear about this?
No,
The winner of the contest actually just did a mirrored version of a really big photo they saw
Interesting.
online, and then it was because it went down into pedantics, and it was also misogyny because female photographer, male painter. It was literally like an exact tracing on it, but because it was mirrored, they determined that it was like an original work of art. So it's very much about like who your judge is too, which is
Oh,
another
interesting.
another
Yeah.
shitty aspect of it, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, complicated and definitely
It is.
very interesting. And if you're curious enough to go into like the like all these open source like databases and stuff and just see what's currently in the public domain, it actually can be kind of cool and inspiring and might also be a bit of an acid trip depending on what's in there. So yeah. Great segue into the next question, which is let's talk about fan art. So a lot of artists, including those studying here at AU Arts, are really inspired by Disney and Ghibli and like all these other creators who have become so enmeshed in kind of just our cultural identities and the nostalgia of when we grew up and stuff. Artists making fan art professionally are absolutely respected in their field. They can make a living from their work. We know tons of them out there who are at cons, at expos and stuff, and do a really great job and have their own style. But considering everything about copyright, what kind of challenges and risks do you think, people take when it comes to like making fan art, especially making it for a living?
I feel like it just all depends about context, right? Like if you're doing fan art and you're selling it outside of like a con where it's more so like prints, I guess it's all just like dependent on who actually gets their eyes on it, more or less. Like at a con, nobody's gonna care. But if you're painting of a Ghibli scene that's like, whatever, pretty close to the original, or just like maybe the original like tweaked a bit, it goes up to like say at Sotheby's, right? Then you're going to start raising some eyebrows. I think like most of the time doing fan art like goes under the radar. It technically is illegal, especially if you're doing it under a corporate kind of entity. Like say you have like a business that's selling prints, right? That's like, it's definitely illegal. Like it's not legal, but it's like whether or not like people care. It's like on a personal artist level, 99.9% of the time, no. But it's not like you can't technically copyright the work. It's like most of the time like it's free advertising for companies as well. So most people, 90% of people won't care.
Yeah, so it can be kind of complicated, but as you said, like someone may make like put, I don't know, Mickey Mouse on a cake, or just make 2 cakes of it and take a picture and post it somewhere, and the creator might actually really like it and feel that it was like a promotion. But like, again, if it's mass production, it's going to be an issue. Like Andy Warhol was one of those artists that did a whole series of like Mickey Mouse and Disney works, but he was certified, so he got a license and he started mass production like that. But there are really risks of getting sued if you're not certified, and wanting to make money from it. And I think also the other risk would be that you might be able, even get certified, produce a lot of work, and make a lot of money. But the downside of it would be that as an artist, you're not going to be known for that art. Is somebody else's art that is already well known. I want to actually like encourage you to go and watch Pablo Picasso's movie if you have access to Disney Plus. It was really interesting to see that how he was like navigating these scenes of art, like competing with other artists that were also like alive during the same time, like Cezanne and Matisse, where they were friends. At some point they became friends, but during that time he was like putting his work in, submitting the work for whatever exhibition. And then as soon as he would find out that, Matisse was in that exhibition too, he would take his work out, because he's like, oh, now people know that I am slightly painting like him, because now this is selling. And then the collectors were also finding out about the idea that, oh, let's put them into competition. Let's see which one is going to do better. And at some point they realized that, it was also like this whole thing was playing around with the collectors, the art buyers, wanting to see a particular style of art, and it would really take him away from kind of improving and expanding on his style and his work that he later on became more known for. So I think it's good to also think about like long term, for your art practice and career, not just short term of like making money for today. So those are also some of the risks.
Although I will say though, some of my favorite artists still do fan art and like sell at cons, and then they also have their own professional work. I think like as a like working artist, you have to be very dynamic and like actually just like find different avenues for making money, especially if you're doing it full time. So I mean, do fan art. If the worst you're gonna get is like a slap on the wrist and you can't sell that print anymore most of the time. But yeah, just don't like put on a billboard or something,
Exactly. Yeah, just be aware of it. So
yeah, definitely a very interesting kind of gray area zone to work in for any artists who are listening or watching, who are interested in doing that. Definitely lots to think about. So I mean, we've already identified the elephant in the room, which is AI. So I mean, last year AI articles blew up all over the web. We started hearing about, worries that AI could actually replace artists. I mean, what do you guys think? How will AI continue to affect, how the public and the law views artwork?
I think it's going to be double-edged. I think the sort of low-range type commission work is kind of out the window at this point, unfortunately. Like from what I've seen, a lot of the work that's being replaced is like junior level copyright or junior level concept artists, or people who do like commissions of like pets and that kind of stuff. That seems to be the main thing that's getting hit, unless you're doing like oil paintings and like very much like physical sense. That's like the main thing that's really being hit. A lot of values work. I've tried not to lose my tangent, very ADD brain, but I think as we continue into the future, we're gonna find like a lot of like hiccups and gray zones where say you get like, especially in like a video game, right? You generate like characters, but then this character pulls like a very quintessential design element from like another game, right? Or another movie. That is going to lead to issues. It's already been determined in the states that work that's generated by AI and just like flat outputs can't be copywritten. So that's going to set like a huge precedent going forward into like the way movies are made and way games are made. In terms of like art itself, I think fine art has very much been invaded by AI and very much like has a huge part of AI. It just depends on like which context you're using AI in. There's like, I think when people say like AI, we're very much thinking about like large image model like generation, like just flat spit output an image, right? And then you just like, sell that. But AI does exist on like many different levels and forms. And I think it all depends on about like how deeply you're getting into like replacing the artist's hand very much, where things start to, I guess, make a bit more sense.
I also think like AI is really good for like research and reproduction. It's definitely not an innovator on its own unless you put in the information. Like even when you use any of these like applications or tools that's for, I don't know, DALL-E for example, and you give a prompt of give me a painting of Van Gogh. If somebody hasn't put a Van Gogh painting into the data, it won't know how Van Gogh looks like. So it's all really whatever that we put into it that can regenerate from it. But it's great. I think it's great for like all the time-consuming work that sometimes we do as artists, like again, like research. It can really minimize that time into much, much shorter time. And it can be a great tool to help you to even become a better artist. I personally think, like, optimistically in the future, I think the original work of art or like performances would become even more valuable or become even more expensive because there is the cheaper version of it that is AI generated also available. So people would want to go to an actual show, an actual exhibition with actual paintings. But pragmatically, we might be even, we might be dealing with way more copyright, issues and infringement of copyrights, and we would be probably fighting quite a bit for our rights at that point. But yeah, I think it has its good and bad aspects for sure, but it does not replace at this point still to be an innovator. So.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Definitely we'll see within the next few years how things are shaping up. Like AI is progressing like dangerously fast, and I think we hit a point where it stopped from being like a cool toy to actually like freaking people out.
Yeah.
So I think like within the next like 2 years things are going to start to unfold in different ways, just both like legally as well as culturally, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't know if any of you guys have seen like Sora, like the new OpenAI model, like
the videos that it makes.
What's that?
With the videos?
Yeah, the videos.
Yeah. Oh, it's amazing.
And like, it's incredible and it's cool technology, but I actually included some slides later in the show.
Great.
But yeah, I think as we progress into the future, it's going to like the human element behind artwork is going to start to reassert its importance, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's basically.
Yeah. Maybe in 2 years we'll have yet another new iteration of this to talk about, how fast everything is changing. Yeah. Is Canada working currently on any AI regulations, laws, or other things to, like help creatives out right now? And if so, how can artists, stay in the loop about this topic?
Nope, not yet. Actually, this is too soon. There are no rules or laws. For example, bringing there are things that are not good that are happening by using AI. For example, like bringing the dead relative to do a comedy or inappropriate usage, along these natures. This is not acceptable, but there are not any hard rules or laws around it yet. So. Yeah.
I think that's coming very quickly. Well, there's already the Taylor Swift deepfake court case ongoing now too, right? I think that's going to be like a huge setter in terms of like where AI is headed next. Yeah, I'm curious to see. I think it's going to be really interesting.
Do you guys get any follow any particular people, news outlets, organizations who are kind of keeping kind of their finger to the pulse on what's happening with AI right now that you might recommend?
I think definitely following Glaze, which is developed by like University of we talked about this, or like Michigan or Chicago. I'm not sure, one of those. It's called like Glaze.com. I don't know. It's University of Michigan /Glaze, I think is the website maybe. But if you go into Twitter, search up Glaze, they're like a software that actually like will sort of encrypt your work. So basically it can't be fed into a AI system, but a lot of the people who are like on the board for that are very much like deeply invested in that. So I think like through social media, finding that page and then sort of like learning further through those guys, as well as like, I encourage people to actually like follow like Sam Altman on Twitter just to see like what those like what the tech bros are talking about, you know, just to see like where they're kind of heading and pushing towards. Not because you support them, but just it's interesting. It's like behind enemy lines kind of vibe, you know. But yeah.
Just to know what's happening in that world. Yeah.
It's like an insane amount of information gets transferred on Twitter, and it's usually most of the time just like in comments, you know. And like all the new stuff about Sora has just been posted in threads, right? And there's like people like delineating like how it actually works behind the scenes, like just like there's no news outlets covering it. It's just like on social media, right? So I think like following the companies that are actually producing this stuff on social media is probably the best way to get your, I guess, finger on the pulse of everything.
Yeah, me too. I've been just watching some YouTube videos and some YouTubers who are very, consistently covering these topics and providing examples of what is happening and how well they are progressing and all that. So
so a lot of interesting resources kind of at the community level currently.
Exactly.
No, that's really good to know for folks here who are interested in continuing to keep up to date about things that are happening for good or for ill as we move forward. As we get into our final topic before Q&A, I did want to apologize. I know in the agenda it said we will start Q&A at 2:15. I meant to say 2:45. So my apologies. I please ask that everyone hold on to your questions just a little bit longer. We are getting to, as I said, the last part of this, and then we will open it up for questions. So embracing new technology. So most of these questions are going to be for our AU Arts alum, Clara, as someone who kind of works regularly with all these like fancy new things. So oh my gosh, I spelled it wrong. I'm so sorry. You're an artist who incorporates AI and NFTs into your artwork, into your art practice. When did you start doing this, and kind of what drew you into using new technologies?
So actually, like what originally drew me into it was the concept of like how much of yourself, like as an artist, are you willing to replace like with AI software? Like how much do you want the software to kind of like hold your hands? So this is a piece I released in 2022, I want to say, like or early 2023. It's called Giving In. So it's very much about like handing yourself over to the machine and how much like you let the machine like kind of like take control of like what you're physically making, right? So this was done with like an early version of DALL-E. It's DALL-E 2, I think. But I actually had to like in paint every single frame. And then, so I think there's like 30 or 40 different frames, and it kind of cycles through them really quickly, just kind of like gives a level of confusion to it. But this was my first foray into AI work. I think it was. I'm pretty sure it was this one. Maybe it was something else, but this is the first one I sold, anyways.
Super cool. So can you tell me? Have you personally found any success, financial or otherwise, how you would define that, as an artist, working within AI? You mentioned that you just ended up selling that piece from the last slide.
Yeah.
Really cool.
So I guess like another good example is like my primary like work focus is within 3D. So I use a lot of like 3D and performance art and like performance capture type work, and then I kind of incorporate that into like my AI workflow. So my stuff is very like multi-layered in terms of what I'm actually producing. So this piece is called The Fall. So this piece was sold at Christie's last year. I don't remember exactly how much for. Also, I feel like name dropping prices is weird, but this was probably one of my bigger releases that incorporated AI into it. So this one was actually like a fully rendered video, and then I ended up feeding it through Stable Diffusion on like multiple layers. So I used like, for any of like the nerds, I used like EXR files and then fed in the different layers of the EXR files into a Stable Diffusion model, and then kind of got that to just basically make some craziness. So it's kind of to add more to the confusion rather than like generate a final result. But yeah, that was The Fall. So that one, I think that was probably my highest selling AI work, or work that incorporates AI.
Yeah. So there's you found that there's definitely a market,
Yeah.
which is kind of cool.
How much time did it take you to put that together?
This one was like, it all kind of depends, right? Because I have like recurring characters I use in my work. So like the spacesuit was like an earlier creation, but everything is so like the spacesuit is probably like 2 or 3 weeks to make, and then motion capture data takes like 4 days, and then the actual like compositing and rendering of the scene was probably another 2 or 3 weeks. So like maybe like a month, but I'm a lot faster at it now, so I can like push stuff out. Is very much like a learning experience for this one as well. But yeah, so like a month and a bit maybe.
So now that you're better at it, how much faster you can do it?
I made a piece for a show in Milan in a week.
Okay.
With is kind of the same idea. Yeah.
Okay.
That's pretty cool.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like it's really interesting, right? When you start working with, it seems very like overwhelming. Like I actually started working with Blender like when I was still in ACAD, sorry, AU Arts. And at the start, it's like you're gonna make shit, and you're gonna make like stuff that's really bad. But I think like just sort of like pushing through and actually like starting to learn the work, you not only like start to understand it, but then you also start to get faster at it. So it feels less like a hiccup to start to incorporate new tech into it. So very much advocate for even like painters to start working with like weird shit like Stable Diffusion or 3D in their work. It doesn't necessarily even have to be AI type work, but yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Cool.
What's your personal view on AI as someone who works with it? Do you think there's a really great opportunity for artists to use it to their advantage in their practice while still, being ethical to themselves and to their community?
Yeah, totally. So I don't use it so much for concepting work anymore, but even for this piece, so this is Campy. I have like many robots that I've made. He is a hiker robot. I don't know if I include the video, but you can find him online, just like through my Instagram. But kind of the way that I got the, like, sort of like was roughing out his shape and then kind of progressing on from there was like originally like a Midjourney render. And then there was a lot about it I didn't like. So I ended up like painting over it, adding like the face, backpack work in there. And then as I was doing it, like within 3D, I was also like iterating and like sketching upon it. Like there was some pretty like different design fundamentals that I ended up incorporating into it. But very much for like, I guess, rough idea, bringing out shapes and then kind of like letting that expand your work rather than just like become your work, I think is the smartest way for artists to use it. Then there's also like the other end of things where like if you want to work with AI to like add effects to the work, you can do that as well. But yeah, I think that's the best way to kind of use it to your advantage without just like throwing your art practice out the window. As you can kind of enhance what you're making with it.
Have you had any works that, like, let's say you generated something with AI and then you print it out and like painted actually over it, or this when you say painted, you mean
So
like digitally painted?
Digitally painted,
Okay.
yeah. So like with this, I just like obviously I brought it over to Photoshop and then I shifted some stuff around and then it's kind of painted over it in Photoshop, replaced the leg, and then from there it's kind of just like a rough idea, and then I brought that into 3D and kind of like reiterated everything. It's pretty similar, but there's a lot of like design features that I didn't really like the boots and the way that the helmet is, and then also like the interconnection of like the arms itself. I'm very into like mechanical type stuff, so I wish I included the video. But yeah, that's kind of how.
Cool. So you haven't done like actually printing it out and like painting over it?
No, but I know people who
Do that.
stuff.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, or they'll like project like AI type work like on top of paintings. I mean, there's so many different ways to actually like think about like
Right.
incorporating it without just like spitting something out of Midjourney, printing it out, handing it in, you know?
Right.
Yeah, that's kind of cool to think
yeah.
about that it can be, a component of that creative process in many different ways, whether digital or physical. So, I mean, maybe this is a simplistic question, but I mean, when you make AI generated artwork, does it belong to you or to the program?
I think, I guess, harkening back, it's very much like is it inspired or copying? I think if you're trying to make stuff that just looks exactly like somebody else, then that's both uninspired and copying, you know? But if you're actually like using it to your advantage and pushing something new, pushing boundaries, creating something totally new, even though it is trained from data sets. We'll see the legality of like data sets within the next few years. But I think if you're actually like making new stuff, not selling it commercially in like a video game or movie context, and actually like just like putting it out as art, like subversive copyright art has existed forever. I think this is kind of like art has always been a gray zone. So in this case, I mean, this is just copying, right? But if it looks different, you can't really like put your finger on like what it actually is. Then AI work like is pretty original, right? Like even a buddy of mine, Rafiq Anadol, he has a show going on at MoMA right now. His stuff is like AI generated, but it's actually like completely. It's like you can like just pick it out of a crowd, like where it actually all of the inspiration came from, right? So I think it's about originality to a certain extent, rather than just like, oh, it's AI, so it's therefore bad. You know, there's a lot of gray zones to it, and I think we're gonna see like what softwares, what data sets, what's gonna be legal within the next few years. But I mean, pretty much every photo you see online now uses like Photoshop generative fill, or like FaceApp is AI. You know, Snapchat filters are AI enabled now too. TikTok, most of the filters on TikTok are AI, voices are AI. You know, how much of that is your content versus the computer's content? And I think most of the time it's your content. It just depends on how you use it.
Interesting. All right. I guess for those of us who are interested, what are some AI programs that you enjoy using, and maybe see if you can tell us about an AI fail that you've had.
I mean, I don't think I included. Well, I guess in the center, I sort of was like regenerating my profile picture that I use on everything. Although I do think this is kind of cute now, looking back at it. But most of the software that I use for AI work is Midjourney in the center, just for like concepting work out, or After Effects has a lot of really good AI-enabled plugins. Like this one's called Mask Prompter. So it's actually basically like a chroma key type work without actually using like green screens or blue screens or sand screens, if you want to talk Dune. I really like that software. It like makes our workflow super fast. And then on the right is Stable Diffusion. So Stable Diffusion is probably the most like bootstrappy, I guess like community run type projects. So with Stable Diffusion, you can actually train it like on your own work and then use that work to actually generate new stuff. So I've seen a lot of people, especially photographers, create like new data sets with their work in Stable Diffusion. And then you can actually train an algorithm and then take your work and then cross it over into like a new version of it, or do text to image, which is basically describe what you want it to make. And then it's all like based off of your work in general. So it's definitely like, if you want to draw lines, that is not stealing, you know. But Stable Diffusion is a really cool one. It's super complicated. Try not to get ripped off. There's a lot of scams for Stable Diffusion, but it's on GitHub. I don't know the exact link, but you'll find it. You know, I've paid.
Pretty cool. Have you ever had kind of an instance where maybe like tried a prompt or did something and it did not turn out super great, or just kind of funky?
I hit a point with Midjourney a while back where I was designing a lot of my, I do a lot of robots in my work. And I kind of hit a point where they were just making the same shit again and again and again. And it was like fun for a bit. I made like 2 robots based off of AI. And then I just started to think that it literally just looked like Blizzard, or like it just looked like a version of like somebody else's work, or like it just looked like quote unquote ArtStation, which is very much like, if you know, it's like pipes over everything and all that shit, Greebles. So that's when I hit a wall with AI for my concept work, but I think it really depends on what you're shooting for. Fails. I mean, I'm pretty careful with it. I've seen a lot of people try to sell work as like an original painting, but it's just like AI generated. And then they put like a canvas texture over it and then try to like print that out on paper and then sell that. Yeah, that's just pretty bad. But
does it work?
Yeah,
Oh,
I mean,
really? Oh.
until she got caught post fact, but she
Okay.
made like $10,000.
Oh,
you know?
wow.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
but now her art career is ruined, so I don't know if that was worth it.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know.
I find it interesting, like more serious stuff aside, when I see some AI pieces, I'm like, wow, I guess AI doesn't like drawing hands as much as any human artist does
Yeah.
either. You know, all these
Yeah.
fun little things, these artifacts that come in. Then I'm next. There we go.
Oh.
Okay, so didn't realize there was sound there, my friends. Are there any artists you follow who are using AI or subverting it in cool ways?
Yeah, so these are three artists I really like. On the far left is, sorry, I just realized I'm like barely talking to my mic. On the far left is Andre O'Shea. In the middle is CSTX, who's, I think, from South America. We only know each other through the internet, but I really love their work. They do like super weird, subversive shit. And then on the right is Kit Volta, another like really amazing artist based out of Brooklyn. But her work is very much like conceptually driven, and it's very much like self-portraiture, but within this kind of like weird context of like this cerebral headspace that AI kind of like operates within. Like nothing looks like totally tangible and real. So these three are probably my big three for AI. There's obviously, of course, like thousands of people making art with AI online right now. But yeah, those are my big three that I chose for this presentation, anyways.
Cool, and I'll definitely be getting those links from you a little later to share, and anyone, in case anyone wants to take a peek and follow these artists.
Yeah.
And my final question, I swear, before we get into the Q&A, what advice would you give to artists who are interested in exploring the possibilities of AI within their practice?
Just like remember the humanity behind it. We're kind of hitting a point in AI development where stuff is so real, but it's not, and it's starting to I included this thread because this was like, it really changed my mind on a lot of stuff, especially like I wasn't super for AI, but this kind of like this made me cry, and thinking about kind of the loss of humanity behind the work and how much is just like an algorithm trained on the work. And it's like the end result might look beautiful, but like it's like art's so much about the human experience, right? And I think as we go forward and start to realize that, I think you have to really like come to grips with that yourself, especially if you're using AI, and you have to think about like how that affects your practice and like honor the people and the work that's like gone into it, and how can you do that in a way that kind of pushes forward rather than just like grabbing a bunch of shit that's been trained out of it and just selling it, right? Like it's where you kind of draw like the conceptual line versus like, do you want to make a bunch of money line, Yeah. This is a heavy read, so don't feel like you have to read it, but
Yeah, you can we'll include this as well as part of the resources in case you want to look at the thread. It did make me cry a little.
yeah, it's deep, yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much, both of you, for bringing all of your ideas, your experience, your opinions to the table here to talk about some pretty interesting gray area stuff. We appreciate you being here and spending time with us. We're now going to move into a general Q&A time. So how this is going to work is I'm going to snag one of the microphones from our handy dandy presenters, and then if anyone has a question, I can pass that microphone over so the question can get recorded, and it's not just a random person answering the void within the recording. If you feel comfortable speaking, if not, you can whisper your question to me, and then I can also say it for you if you would like. During this time, I would also like to see if anyone is interested in doing a special workshop survey. As mentioned before, we are sponsored by RBC Future Launch to help pay CARFAC fees for our wonderful presenters to make it free for you guys to attend today and in the future via recording. We would much appreciate if you are able to spend just like 2 minutes of your time to answer this quick survey. It does help us get grant funding so we can continue to do events like these. If you do not have a phone that has QR capabilities, feel free, come up to me later and I can send you the link, but anything helps, so thank you so much. I will now go and grab one of the mics and see if anyone has questions. Feel free to raise your hand. We have a question.
Okay, so I work a lot with like wildlife and paintings and drawings of animals, and I don't photograph them myself, and I source that from the internet. I was wondering, like, because I'm adding my own style and I'm using a different medium, like how that may infringe on copyright. Like, is it like if I'm sourcing perhaps something on Pinterest, which I know isn't great in the first place, or like a wildlife photographer, do I then have to give credit to that photographer if I'm also altering their original photograph in the first place and then imposing my own style? Like, I'm just wondering what area that lies in, I guess.
So are you using the entire photo, or like, let's say if there's a beautiful bridge in that photo, you're just using the bridge?
It's kind of like I almost like collage it in a
Okay.
way, and I do that digitally, and then I draw the collage traditionally using pen and ink.
Okay. In that case, no, you're still creating an original art, unless again, let's say like what is the main central theme of that photo that you're using as a reference is kind of like incomplete and the totality of it is used in your artwork, then you're infringing someone's copyrights. But if you're just using parts of it to kind of collaging it, you're just using that part as a reference. And maybe you also alter it slightly yourself, so it's probably not exactly looking like that tree that particularly in that photo. So yeah.
Okay, cool. And I was also curious about like sourcing material that isn't necessarily art in the first place, I guess, because I also use trail cams very heavily, and I get those off the internet as well. But like it could be like that's not really art necessarily, it's just media that I'm repurposing. Does that also like infringe on anything?
Do you know who is the creator of those?
I get them off YouTube, so I guess technically I know like the channel and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Then maybe you can contact the YouTuber and just, or at least just acknowledging that, letting them know. And I think it's also good to get in contact with other creators of different forms, because it also promotes this culture of collaboration and working together. And you never know, maybe that will actually flourish into some bigger endeavor together. So yeah, maybe it would be a good idea to contact that YouTuber and just letting them know that you're using their work in your work, and this is the result. If it comes down to that conversation of like, are you selling your work? Are you making money out of it? And and all of that, then you can have a more in-depth discussion of like how you're going to compensate them if you're actually making any money out of your work that way. Yeah.
I think another thing to keep in mind is like, try to like treat what you put out like everybody on Earth is gonna see it, and like if the creator of the trail cam videos like saw that and be like, oh, that feels like a rip off of my stuff, right? Then like how much are you willing to like fight for that versus like, oh, it's like obviously I referenced it, but it's different enough, versus like, say a photographer, you paint one of their photos. If it's similar enough where they feel like they have an issue with it, then like just like treat what you put out in that context, right? Because you could get away with it, but I've seen like it just like really depends on how transformative it is too, right? Also, the option is there, use AI, like you can use AI to generate stuff to then paint, and then kind of bring it from there. So
Good idea. I've been kind of also toying with the idea of like using Canva for some of these, like things that, again, like that's public domain. If there's a interesting drawing in one of Canva's stuff there, and I just use it in my art, layering it with my own painting, and I like the way that it looks like, I'm just gonna use it. So yeah, it's just good to know what is part of the public domain that you could use, and like what are other tools that you can use to eliminate this whole issue if it's going to be problematic for you or you think it might be. Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Thanks. We got another question. I'm going to head up to this row.
So I understand that all artwork is kind of automatically copyrighted once you create it, but what would the benefits be for like going through with the proper registration?
What would be the benefit of proper registration of it? Again, if let's say your art career is doing really well, you know, people are contacting you to have your work exhibited, or the image of your work being used for different sort of publications like calendars, books, by different organizations and businesses. Let's say that you're being contacted for your work to be featured in a TV or whatever, right? Like, it means that your work has some demand, right? Like, people want to see it, people want to use it. So, and really, you're not registering your work as long as you are creating your work and it's original work of art. It is legally or legal rights to be able to get compensated for the usage of the work and getting royalties or exhibition fees or whatever your art is being used for. When you say registration, what do you mean exactly by that? You mean that like trademarking it?
I mean, like I'm pretty sure there's a process you can go through where if you pay a fee that's like $50, you can get it registered or something. I might be wrong, but that's just what I've heard.
No, not for works of art. They are automatically, you have this legal right to it. But if it's an idea that you want to trademark, then yes, there is a fee for it. Then so no one else would take that idea. But for the copyrights, as long as the work is fully formed and completed, you already are entitled to your copyrights.
Thank you.
Any other questions for our presenters? 1 second.
So there is mention of Midjourney and Stable Diffusion. My question is, are they in a way that, because I heard that most of those web, they kind of just steal art from artists, so technically it's illegal. I'm not sure if the program you mentioned is in a way like they are doing it in a more respectful way, like actually using other people art with permission and train the AI, and then yeah, like I don't know how to phrase it, like let's just say if it's those art are stolen from artists without their knowledge, and we used it for our reference per se, is that still okay? And yeah.
I think it's very much like a gray zone. Like, if you're like, I don't know if you've ever used like a generation program, but when you're actually typing in prompts, you can type in like anything, right? So what a lot of people will do when they're trying to basically emulate an artist's style is they'll do like in the style, like say like painting of woman in field of flowers in the style of blah blah blah, you know. And I think like if you're strategically pulling data sets from an individual artist to just make something that looks like them, then you start to hit the point where it's like A is morally wrong, and B, then they might start having a case, right? Like a few slides ago, there was Sam Draws, I think is their name. Can we like pull back to that one? Okay. Thank you.
No problem. Give me a moment. No, there we go. This one.
So yeah, Sam does art. So this particular like example in of itself, this was actually people went online, harvested all of his pictures that he's like ever drawn, fed it into a data set to just make art that looks like his, right? So it was, you could tell it's kind of like a jank AI. I don't know if you know like the AI grit that kind of happens when the data set isn't totally good, but this was specifically made to basically rip him off. You know, the thing about like Midjourney data sets and OpenAI data sets and so many of the other data sets is it's this like evil vampire version of these smaller data sets where it's like there's like every photo on the entire internet is fed into them, you know? So it's almost impossible for individuals to go after and sue these companies without like government intervention, right? So it's like kind of like beyond our point in terms of like whether or not it's legal to do it. I think if you use it, it won't be like you're going to go to jail, but it'll be like you just like it's that like morally wrong kind of thing, right? Or it's like if you start being known as like an artist who's emulating other artists, then your work won't be as highly valued. You know, it's a lot of it's just about like establishing your own name as an artist rather than like, oh, I don't want to get sued. You know what I mean? Like I said with the artist earlier, like she was generating these AI works and then trying to pass them off as her original paintings. She's not going to go to jail for that because she got caught. It's because she ruined her reputation in one foul swoop, right? By basically lying to the public. That's what most people should be concerned about 90% of the time. Of course, like if you AI generate something that's like very copyright, like, I don't know, like Darth Vader, and then you tried to pass that off as your own creation, then you're gonna face some problems. But it's just such a gray zone. It's so hard to like definitively give answers, you know?
It's just more on moral things about should I support those program even if it's gonna help me with my creations? That's just a problem.
Really good questions. Yeah, it's quite a gray zone. I know that Clara and I were talking slightly before the panel about the idea of an ethical data set that, you know, for example, if you found a program and then you trained it off of just your own work or just work that was consented for and, you know, like the artists were compensated, can that become an ethical AI thing? I don't know if you want to speak to that because you mentioned like some photographers training data sets off their own work, I think, before.
Yeah, well, that happens. There's also like the example of like Enter the Spider-Verse where they actually train their own data sets to like draw individual lines like on top of the frame too, right? To not so much to like recreate the scenes, but to just like lighten workload by like, you know, drawing 200 lines around the jawline of the main characters, and then getting an AI to basically generate those on top so they don't have to go through and redraw the exact same line for, you know, 200,000 frames of the movie or whatever it is, right? There's definitely, could I get a repeat of the original question again? Oh yeah, ethical data sets, right? Yeah, it's like the thing about these companies is they're all closed source and they're all like this icky kind of background that the only way you can kind of be sure about it is to use something like Stable Diffusion. But another thing about like OpenAI and Midjourney and those kind of softwares is that their data sets are so vast and they're so refined that like most people go to them just because the result is so good, right? Or like it's so like well trained that what you're getting out of it is like insane. You know?
So for AI plebeians, the idea is that like the smaller of a data set, the crunchier and maybe less refined it is. And then, you know, the more data and more time that the AI has to train on, then you start getting it slightly more refined imagery and outputs from that, correct?
For my piece, The Fall, I used this crunchy as fuck data set that was basically trained off of a bunch of like royalty-free art online. So I was trying to be as ethical about it as I can, but the piece wasn't really about the actual like training and the like the generated image I was using, as was it was used as like a tactic to kind of like inspire more like chaos and confusion and that idea of like the internet coming into the work itself, right? So it all depends on like use and stuff as well. You know, it's just like, yeah, it's complicated. I don't know.
Any more questions for our lovely panelists? Anything at all? Anything else you panelists would like to bring up to our audience? Final notes, final thoughts as we close down for the workshop?
Thank you so much, everyone. Just make sure you protect your art and your rights and also protect other people's rights. It's good to keep yourself kind of educated about these things as you're moving forward and everything is progressing. And yeah, I also like really agree with Clara's perspective on like do the thing that is moral to you, you know, and like and ethical, and you're not going to hurt yourself or others. And you know, in the long term, again, you're going to feel much better about yourself and your art career. So that's my last words.
Thanks so much for listening to me ramble for 3 hours. So thanks for coming up. If you guys want to like ask me any more questions or like want details, like feel free to reach out to me on like Instagram or socials or whatever. I'm like chronically online, so you can just, you know, pick my brain a bit. Yeah, that's about it.
If there's any of these pieces, any of these resources that you'd like to check back on later, or any of your friends who have missed out on the live portion of this workshop, we will have the recording available just for AU Arts students within the next 2 weeks or so. And we'll have that on actually the showandsale.ca website, which is where we have a link to a private YouTube channel just for you guys. So I'll be sure to collect the different like image references and various websites that the two of our panelists have mentioned. So feel free to check back on it anytime. And for those viewing the recording, feel free to continue to, you know, watch this as a video or even listen to it as a podcast. We appreciate any way that you want to join us and join the conversation. So thank you everybody for coming.